Imagine your parents choosing your twin's fiction over your reality. That was my life. Falsely accused and cast out at 16, I learned the brutal truth. Family can be the sharpest knife. My life, from the outside, might have seemed like any other. A suburban home, a family of 4. But behind closed doors, a subtle discord played out daily. My twin brother, Ethan, was the sun in my parents' sky, his achievements magnified, his flaws overlooked. I orbited in his shadow, my passions for soccer and art deemed distractions from the important business of academics. Ethan's domain. Small incidents began to chip away at the facade of normalcy. A birthday party for Ethan, a quiet dinner for me. My parents' quick dismissal of my soccer victories, their effusive praise for Ethan's latest science project. These moments, innocuous on their own, formed a mosaic of unequal love. My grandmother's visits were a brief respite. She saw me, truly saw me, beyond the shadow of my brother. Her small gifts and quiet encouragement were a lifeline in a sea of indifference. But as we grew older, the imbalance shifted into something darker. My parents' favoritism of Ethan morphed into outright dismissal of me. My interests were belittled, my efforts mocked. The Snapchat incident became a flashpoint, the punishment absurdly severe, the message brutally clear. I was a second-class citizen in my own home. Ethan, sensing the shift, seized the opportunity. His petty jabs turned into outright sabotage. Missing items were found in my possession. Stories twisted to paint me as the instigator in any disagreement. My parents, their judgment clouded, believed him without question. His tactics escalated, subtle cruelty bleeding into open malice. He'd mimic my voice to send cruel messages, turn my friends against me with carefully constructed lies. The isolation deepened, friends grew distant, whispers followed me in the halls. The conflict reached a breaking point on our shared 14th birthday. While Ethan's party remained empty, my friends surprised me with a joyous outing. His resulting rage would unleash a chain of events that would shatter my life. The aftermath of that disastrous 14th birthday party served as a stark demarcation line in my life. The simmering undercurrent of favoritism and neglect that had characterized my childhood escalated into a full-blown storm of hostility, with Ethan at its cruel epicenter. His initial jabs, once subtle and deniable, morphed into calculated acts of sabotage, each designed to undermine my position within the family and erode my already fragile sense of self-worth. It began with small, insidious acts, easily dismissed in isolation, but deeply damaging in their accumulation. A cherished necklace, a gift from my grandmother, vanished from my room, only to reappear days later, tucked away in my drawer. "I don't know how that got there," I remember saying to my mother, my voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Maybe you just misplaced it, honey," she replied, her tone dismissive, her eyes never meeting mine. Ethan would never do something like that. Then there were the disagreements, the inevitable clashes of personality inherent in any sibling relationship. But Ethan, fueled by a potent cocktail of jealousy and entitlement, twisted every argument, every minor spat, into a dramatic performance where I was cast as the villain. "She attacked me," he'd cry, his voice laced with theatrical tears, his eyes wide with feigned innocence. "She's always so angry, so jealous of me." And my parents, their judgment clouded by years of ingrained favoritism, readily believed him. "You need to learn to control your temper," my father would say, his brow furrowed in disapproval, his gaze fixed on me, with a disappointment that cut deeper than any physical blow. "Ethan's right. You're becoming impossible to live with." My attempts to defend myself, to offer my perspective, were met with a wall of indifference, a fortress of unwavering belief in Ethan's inherent goodness. "Ethan wouldn't lie," my mother would declare, her voice laced with a certainty that brooked no argument. "He's always been such a good boy, so sensitive." My father, ever the pragmatist, would offer a hollow platitude, a tired refrain of, "Just try to get along," as if Ethan's malice was a mere childish squabble, easily resolved with a bit of compromise on my part. Compromise that always seemed to fall on my shoulders. Their unwillingness to acknowledge the truth, their refusal to see beyond their idealized image of Ethan, chipped away at my confidence, leaving me feeling invisible, unheard, and increasingly isolated within the very walls of my home. Ethan, emboldened by their unwavering support and the complete absence of consequences for his actions, grew bolder, more brazen in his campaign against me. The subtle manipulations, the carefully crafted insinuations, escalated into outright acts of cruelty, designed to inflict maximum damage. He discovered my social media passwords and began to mimic my voice, sending cruel and hurtful messages to my friends under my name, turning my closest confidants against me, poisoning my relationships with carefully constructed lies. "I can't believe you'd say such things," my best friend Sarah said to me one afternoon, her voice tight with hurt. "I thought we were friends." I stared at her, dumbfounded, the words on the screen a twisted reflection of myself. "Sarah, I swear it wasn't me," I pleaded, but the damage was done. The seeds of doubt had been sown. He spread vicious rumors about my behavior, painting me as aggressive, unstable, and prone to violent outbursts. He'd whisper to classmates, his voice low and conspiratorial, "You have to be careful around her. She has a real temper." The whispers followed me in the hallways, curious glances turning into stares of judgment. Once friendly smiles replaced with suspicion and fear. The isolation was suffocating, a heavy blanket that smothered my spirit and stole my joy. The school, once a place of learning and laughter, transformed into a hostile battleground where I was constantly on the defensive. The one place I had always sought solace, my bedroom, became another battleground, another stark reminder of my powerlessness. The removal of my door, initially a punishment for the Snapchat incident, became a permanent fixture, a constant invasion of my privacy, a symbol of my parents' complete control over my life. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, trapped in a web of lies and deceit, with no escape and no refuge. "Where's my door?" I finally dared to ask my father one evening, my voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged, his eyes never leaving his newspaper. "You don't need it. You have nothing to hide." My grandmother remained my only lifeline, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Her visits were a source of warmth and comfort, her unwavering belief in my innocence a stark contrast to my parents' blind faith in Ethan. She saw through his facade, her quiet strength and unwavering love a balm to my wounded spirit. She offered a safe space where I could be myself, free from judgment and accusations. Her presence a reminder that I was not entirely alone in this increasingly lonely battle. "Oh, my darling," she'd say, wrapping me in a warm embrace, her eyes filled with a deep understanding. "You know I believe you, don't you? You're strong, and you'll get through this." However, even her unwavering support couldn't fully counteract the corrosive effects of Ethan's manipulations and my parents' indifference. The constant negativity, the relentless undermining of my character, began to take its toll. The weight of their disbelief was a heavy burden, crushing my spirit and dimming my light. My grades, once a source of pride, began to slip. My passion for soccer, once a source of joy and escape, waned, and a heavy cloak of sadness settled over me, stealing my vitality and leaving me feeling hollow and empty. I was losing myself, piece by piece, the vibrant, confident girl I once was, fading into a shadow of her former self. And the people who were supposed to love and protect me were the ones tearing me apart. As the tension within the house grew, so did the undercurrents among my peers. The once solid ground of my social life began to crumble as Ethan's lies seeped into the school environment, poisoning relationships and fracturing friendships. Sides began to form, loyalties were tested, and alliances shifted with the ever-changing tide of rumors and accusations. Some of my friends, the ones who had witnessed Ethan's manipulations firsthand, remained steadfast, their belief in me unwavering, their support a silent act of rebellion against the prevailing narrative. "We know you wouldn't do those things," my friend Alex assured me, his voice firm. "We've seen how Ethan acts." But others, swayed by Ethan's lies and the allure of popularity, drifted away, their allegiance shifting with the wind, leaving me feeling adrift and increasingly alone in the hostile environment of my own school. This division among my friends, the fracturing of my social circle, added another layer of complexity to an already unbearable situation. The loss of trusted confidants deepening the sense of isolation and amplifying the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. The second act of this family tragedy saw Ethan's campaign of cruelty reach new depths. The subtle manipulations and insidious lies of the first act, gave way to brazen acts of sabotage and calculated cruelty, designed to inflict maximum damage and solidify my position as the family pariah. His tactics became increasingly physical, his lies more elaborate and difficult to refute. It started with small, easily dismissed incidents: a shove in the hallway, a deliberately spilled drink. "It was an accident," he'd insist, his eyes wide with feigned innocence, his voice dripping with theatrical remorse. But the accidents became more frequent, more deliberate, each one carefully staged to occur when our parents were present. Then came the self-inflicted injuries, small bruises at first, easily explained away as clumsiness or playground mishaps. But they escalated: black eyes, scratches, welts, each one meticulously inflicted, each one attributed to my supposed violence. He'd craft elaborate tales of my violent outbursts, his voice trembling with feigned fear, his eyes wide with practiced innocence. "She just snapped," he'd whisper to our parents, his gaze darting nervously in my direction. "I don't know what set her off, but she just started hitting me." And my parents, their capacity for reason seemingly eroded by their blind devotion to Ethan, never questioned the veracity of his claims. They saw only what they wanted to see: their precious son, the innocent victim, and me, the monstrous aggressor. Their indifference to my pleas for truth solidified into active hostility. I became the enemy in their eyes, the source of their son's pain, the disruptor of their carefully constructed family harmony. "What's wrong with you?" my mother would demand, her face contorted with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Why are you doing this to your brother? He's done nothing to deserve this." My father, his voice cold and devoid of any warmth, would echo her sentiments. "We're ashamed of you. You're becoming a danger to this family." The consequences of Ethan's lies rippled through my life with devastating force, each wave crashing against the shores of my already fragile existence. The rumors that swirled around school transformed me into an outcast, a pariah shunned by my peers and viewed with suspicion by the faculty. Friends I'd known for years, friends I'd shared secrets and dreams with, turned away, their faces etched with a mixture of pity and fear. Invitations dwindled, whispers followed me in the hallways. Curious glances turned into stares of judgment. Once friendly smiles replaced with suspicion and fear. The school, once a place of learning and laughter, became a hostile battleground where I was constantly on the defensive, forced to navigate a minefield of rumors and accusations. The teachers, too, were not immune to the pervasive narrative. Their demeanor shifted, their smiles became strained, and I could sense their unease in my presence. The once encouraging nods in the hallway were replaced with wary glances, the supportive comments on my assignments with curt, impersonal feedback. I was no longer seen as a bright student with a promising future, but as a problem child, a threat to the school's delicate balance, a stain on their otherwise pristine academic environment. My emotional distress reached a fever pitch, a crescendo of despair that threatened to consume me entirely. The weight of the accusations, the betrayal of my family, and the ostracization by my peers formed an unbearable burden, crushing my spirit and stealing my will to fight. I was drowning in a sea of lies, gasping for air, and finding no hand to pull me to safety. The once vibrant colors of my life faded into a monochrome of gray, the laughter and joy replaced with a constant ache in my chest, a gnawing emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. My grandmother, her heart breaking for my suffering, became my sole anchor in the storm, my only source of light in the encroaching darkness. Her unwavering belief in my innocence was a lifeline, a testament to the enduring power of love and truth in a world that seemed determined to deny both. She offered a safe haven, a space where I could be myself without fear of judgment or condemnation. Her presence a constant reminder that I was not entirely alone in this increasingly lonely battle. "You are strong," she'd tell me, her voice firm and unwavering, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "You will get through this. Don't let them break you." However, the chasm between my reality and the world's perception of me grew wider each day, the gulf between truth and fiction an abyss that seemed impossible to bridge. The tension in the house was palpable, a suffocating presence that hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Every interaction with my parents was fraught with animosity. Every glance from Ethan laced with malicious triumph, a constant reminder of his power and my utter powerlessness. "Just stay out of my way," he'd whisper, a smirk playing on his lips. "It'll be easier for everyone that way." The escalation reached its zenith, the conflict hurtling towards its inevitable climax, when the school principal summoned us to his office. In that sterile room, under the harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by the accusing gazes of my parents and the triumphant smirk of my brother, Ethan unleashed his final, most devastating lie, setting the stage for the ultimate betrayal and the shattering of my already fractured world. The principal's office was a stark, brightly lit space, the air thick with a tension so palpable it felt like a physical force, pressing down on me from all sides. My brother, Ethan, sat beside my mother, his posture radiating an air of wounded innocence, his gaze shifting nervously between the principal and me. My father stood behind them, a looming presence, his face a mask of stern disapproval, his eyes fixed on me, with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I sat alone on the opposite side of the polished desk, my hands trembling in my lap, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird desperately seeking escape. The principal, Mr. Henderson, a man whose face usually held a calm and composed demeanor, looked grave, his brow furrowed in concern. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the tense silence, and began to speak, his words measured and deliberate, each one carefully chosen for maximum impact. He recounted the rumors that had been circulating through the school, the accusations of violence and aggression, the disturbing picture that had been painted of me as a volatile and dangerous individual. Each word was like a hammer blow, shattering the last remnants of my hope, driving another nail into the coffin of my reputation. Ethan seized the opportunity, his voice carefully modulated, his tone earnest and sincere, as he launched into a meticulously crafted performance, a web of lies so intricate and convincing, it was almost breathtaking in its audacity. He spoke of secret attacks, of bruises hidden beneath layers of clothing, of a reign of terror inflicted upon him in the shadows of our home, away from the watchful eyes of our parents. His performance was worthy of an Oscar, his every word a calculated strike aimed at my destruction, his every gesture designed to elicit sympathy and solidify his position as the innocent victim. "She's out of control," he whispered, his voice trembling with feigned fear. "I'm scared to even be in the same room with her." My mother, her face contorted with grief and outrage, clutched Ethan's hand tightly, her sobs punctuating his narrative, each one a carefully timed exclamation point to his elaborate tale. My father's eyes burned with righteous anger, his belief in my brother's lies unwavering, his disappointment in me absolute and complete. They were a united front, their loyalty to Ethan absolute and unquestioning, their faith in me eroded beyond repair. "How could you?" my mother cried, her voice thick with emotion. "How could you do this to your own brother?" My father remained silent, his gaze a condemnation more powerful than any words. I tried to defend myself, my voice cracking with desperation, my words tumbling over each other in my frantic attempts to plead my innocence. I begged the principal to see through Ethan's lies. I implored my parents to listen to reason, to remember the girl they knew me to be. But my words were like pebbles thrown against a fortress wall, making no impact against their unwavering conviction, their predetermined narrative. "Please, you have to believe me," I pleaded, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Ethan is lying. He's been lying all along." The principal, swayed by Ethan's performance and my parents' unwavering support, delivered his verdict, his words cold and final, echoing through the room and sealing my fate. I was to be suspended from school for 10 days, a punishment meant to serve as an example to other students, a deterrent to any future acts of violence or aggression. "This school has a zero-tolerance policy," he declared, his voice firm and unwavering. "We cannot and will not tolerate this kind of behavior." The injustice of it all was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me, leaving me gasping for breath and reeling from the sheer unfairness of the situation. I was being punished for crimes I didn't commit, condemned without a fair trial, betrayed by the very people who were supposed to love and protect me unconditionally. The weight of their disbelief was a crushing burden, a heavy reminder that I was utterly alone in this fight. As my parents dragged me from the office, their faces masks of fury and disgust, their hands gripping my arms with a force that bordered on violence, I looked back at my brother. A flicker of triumph crossed his face, a chilling confirmation of his victory. a stark reminder of the depths of his betrayal. In that moment, as the door slammed shut behind me, the last vestiges of my childhood shattered, leaving behind a raw, gaping wound that would take years to heal, a profound sense of loss that would forever alter the course of my life. The immediate aftermath of the principal's decision was a whirlwind of chaos and despair. My parents, their faces etched with a mixture of anger and disappointment, wasted no time in enacting their own form of punishment. They marched me home, their silence more condemning than any shouted accusation. And within hours, my belongings were unceremoniously dumped into a suitcase. I was banished from my home, cast out like a criminal, with no explanation, no room for discussion. My brother watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable, a chilling reminder of his role in my downfall. But from the depths of this despair, a lifeline emerged in the form of my grandmother. She arrived like a beacon of hope, her presence a stark contrast to the cruelty I had just endured. She listened without judgment, offered comfort without reservation, and provided a safe haven when I had nowhere else to turn. "You are not alone," she said, her voice a soothing balm to my wounded soul. "And you will get through this." The consequences for my antagonist, though not immediate or directly imposed by my parents, were set in motion. His web of lies, though initially successful, carried the seeds of its own destruction. The truth, like a persistent weed, would eventually find a way to push through the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. As for my parents, they were left to grapple with the ramifications of their actions, their blind favoritism, their unwavering belief in Ethan, and their callous disregard for me ultimately led to the severing of our relationship, a loss that I mourned but eventually accepted. My journey forward was one of resilience and self-discovery. With my grandmother's unwavering support, I began to rebuild my life, brick by painful brick. I learned to rely on my own strength, to trust my own judgment, and to forge a path independent of the toxic influences of my past. The scars of my experiences remained, but they transformed into symbols of my resilience, reminders of the battles I had fought and the strength I had gained. I discovered a passion for writing, a way to channel my pain into creativity, and found solace in the power of my own voice. In the end, the resolution wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about finding peace within myself, about creating my own definition of family, and about embracing a future where I was the author of my own story. It was about learning that even in the face of immense pain and betrayal, healing and hope are possible. If any of this resonates with you, if you've experienced similar feelings of betrayal or injustice, please know that you're not alone. Your voice matters, and your experiences are valid. I encourage you to share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Let's create a space of support and understanding, a community where we can all find strength in shared experiences.